in the last video, we kind of ended up here. I came up with a feature that's called power-ups. It's something that I want to add to the game. And in the game, you can walk over to an object, and for a timer that counts down on the screen, it will give me a boost. And those boosts can be different kind of things, like faster speed or higher jump. Depending on what color this is, then that will kind of determine what power-up I'm getting. And that's a feature that we want to build for our game. We've figured out that this is like a direction we want to take. So now the next thing is we're currently running a sprint. We're not going to pick this up in this sprint, but we're going to pick it up in the next sprint. So let's have some refinement meeting about this. So first of all, I want to create this. As I said, like when you create stuff for a game, you involve the different kind of departments that we talked about over here, right? So for a feature, as a game designer, I came up with that I want to build power-ups. That comes from a game mechanic. It's a part of the core loop. I'm gonna invite my engineer, one of my engineers, a couple of my engineers who I know wants to work on this, into a meeting, and I'm gonna invite somebody from the art department who can actually tell me, like what that looks like. So I'm gonna pretend to be all those roles, but we're gonna first of all just take a screenshot and pretend that we have been a game designer and we've come up with this rough design. So first of all, I'm in Favro right now, and as a I go into the backlog, and as I've talked to my product owner, and he says, I think this is a great idea. Just start setting it up in the product backlog, and let's actually start getting this feature defined. So in this thing, we're gonna do a refinement. So I'm gonna call this power ups, and I'm just gonna call that a feature. And then I already know that I need a normally when you do a design, you kind of have to, and I think I'm gonna call it like this feature, so like that. And then we're gonna start thinking about like all the things that we need in order to make that feature. And for now, like I'm just gonna keep these things here. So like there's a we're gonna clean this up, so our backlog will actually slowly start looking like an actual backlog. But for now, I'm just gonna keep it so you have that as a reference. And then in the next, once we've created these tasks, in the next video I'm gonna set up like how do we actually set the product backlog, how do we set the sprint, how does that actually run. But in this case, I'm just gonna set up a feature, and let's pretend that we've come up with an idea. Now we want to build this, and we just want to start preparing this feature. Talk about what does it actually take for us to create a minimum viable product, and how much do we need to push this forward in order to bring it into the hands of our players. We again, like the law of 80-20, or the rule of 80-20, just keep that in mind as you are like building these features. You want to build something that's good enough for people to feel that they can actually test it and give it feedback correctly, but you also don't want to take it so far that you've spent too much time on polishing. So let's try and find that balance. So add a row, and let's see what that could be like. So first of all, we have something like we need to create a model that the character can pick up. Like they need to know that there's a power up, so that can become in the form of like a flask if it's a medieval game, or like a any kind of potion, or like a a crystal or something that you can pick up that gives you a power up. So let's say like we need a power up model and design. So either you can, like if you want to spend a lot of time, you can say like, okay, I want to 2D design it. So design 2D design power up model, or power up let's call it let's call it like a vial. That's fun. And then then we also need to make that and we need to create some engineering. So engineers needs to make sure that we can actually pick it up, and it can change color depending on which one is there. So we're gonna say like we need to power up. So if it's just one thing that we can pick up, we can just call it power up, and that means that when I pick one up, it's just gonna be like one power up. But if I call it modular, it means that I can change some of the parameters of that and say like if it's yellow, then it can do this. If it's green, it can do something else, and so on. Then we also need some design, like some UX design. So I'm going to say UX mockup, and we already kind of know that we have that. And then on top of the UX, we also need a UI design. So different kind of tasks, and I'm just going to take all these, hold down shift, and I'm going to drag and drop them under, actually underneath this one. There we go. Boom. And now you can see like how all of those actually drop there, and now I can actually close that in. So that's basically like the simple layout of our power-ups. Like more things that we could also add if we wanted to would be like add level design. So that means that, you know, like the game designer probably will have to go in and, you know, start adding that. And slowly we're just coming up with the features that we need in order to, I'm really not a big fan how these things don't drop very well. But slowly we're just coming up with the different kind of tasks that we need to build. Sometimes, most of the time, you need to go in and just kind of give these ones a little bit harder description. But in the first case, what I'll do is I'll just take a screenshot of this and make sure that that's definitely a part of the actual feature, so people have an idea of which direction we're going. And since this is already the UX mockup, I'm just going to upload that already. So what we build is basically just like a UX and an explainer of what it can do. But what we also need to do is that this is the UX, but we also need to go in and describe a little bit on the feature. And we need to kind of describe, you know, like what is the MVP of this? MVP description, and MVP meaning, you know, like what is it that we need to do in order to get it to the hands of our players. So a feature where you give the player a let's call it timed upgrade. Then we can also give it some parameters, the different for MVP, and that can be, you know, like didn't we say like high jump? And we also wanted like a speed boost, right? I think those were the two things we kind of wrote in here. So faster speed boost, same thing. That's okay. Great. So like, and this can become like a lot more. Like we can, you know, like as soon as we have the tool, like in order to give, you know, grant the player power-ups, what we need to do afterwards is just, you know, maybe we want to, you know, like make 10 different kind of power-ups, you know, like increase intellect, whatever, you know, like anything, you know. But we want to build the system, and we want to build the minimum amount of things that people will need in order to play this comfortably. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I have, you know, like some things here that I can use, and I think like this is good enough for now. So for this video we're good, and in the next video I'm going to start setting up priorities so we can actually talk a little bit about that. So I'll see you in the next one.